Hey, Papa here. Today we're going to be talking about sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks that contain mostly quartz or potassium feldspar, just like we've always been talking about. Sedimentary rocks, how do they form? They're different from igneous rocks. We've been talking a lot about granite gneiss, and felsic tuff and dacite lava. Those are igneous rocks. They start off underground as hot molten magma, and they can spew up and come out of the ground, and then they're lava. That's just molten rock that's underground. As they call it magma. Molten rock that comes out, they call that lava. We've been talking about those, and we've talking about, but now we're going to talk about sedimentary rocks that form differently. Sedimentary rocks happen when all that lava that spewed out gets hard, and then it starts raining and snowing and sleeting. It gets cold and hot, and erosion starts taking place. And so you get piles of sand, piles of silt, piles of clay, and washed down by the rains in different places. And over time, they get covered over and covered over and covered over, and they get hard, and they become sedimentary rocks. So let's talk about the first kind of sedimentary rock that I'm thinking of that contains quartz. What do you think it is? Yeah, you got that right. Go to the beach, and what do you see? Acres and acres of sand. And if that sand gets covered over time, which it will, then it's pushed down and compacted into sandstone. Sandstone is just little sand-sized grains of mostly quartz mashed down into a rock. So let's look at some sandstone. A few years ago, I went out west to Utah, southeastern Utah, to the area of Moab, Utah, and they have bunches and bunches of sandstone formations there in association with Arches National Park and Canyonlands National Park. So this is a piece of sandstone that came from that vicinity. It's kind of colored like beach sand. You'd expect beach sand to be. It's just mostly grains of sand compacted into a rock. I know it's kind of hard to see. The main thing is it's mostly quartz, it's mostly sand-sized grains. No stripes in it, so it's not metamorphic sandstone. Okay, here's another sample of sandstone from the Moab area. This is called the Cedar Mesa sandstone, and it formed during the Permian period, which is about 250 million years ago. If I got that right, maybe about 275 million years ago. And in sand dunes, massive sand dunes on the edge of the Great Kaibab Sea. And these dunes had a lot of iron in them, and so this is kind of red. If you actually go out there and walk on those frozen dunes in the Needle section of Canyonlands National Park, you're going to see stripes of deep dark red sandstone, and then a stripe of pure white sandstone. Well, what's going on there? The red sandstone represents sand that came down from the mountains in a phase in which the mountains were eroding, and it was very iron rich. It was dry, so the iron didn't get washed out of the sand. Then there came a period in which the sea rose, and the ocean came up and washed the iron out of the sand, and laid it up in dunes that were white. So you get white and red. Also, you've heard about when you go out to the deserts of Arabia, you find these oases where there's water just coming out of the ground, and there are these palm trees and all this. Well, you had them out in the Permian sand dunes way back in the old days, before 250 million years ago. And you can recognize these areas when you look at a sandstone because there's a thin layer of chert. And here's a piece of the chert. It's red chert. It's really pretty. Chert is silicon. It's quartz, but it has micro-size crystal structure. They call it crystalline quartz. And this is what formed in these oases. In other words, teeny tiny particles of dust that got blown off of the sand dunes went into these wet areas where the water was flowing and settled down. And then over time they got mashed, and they were so tiny, microscopic, it turned them into chert. So there's a lot of these thin chert layers. Maybe they're this thin, and you see them, and they're crinkly layers that are crinkly in this sandstone rock, and you can just envision this desert dune, a massive desert of dunes with these oases scattered around them, and geologists call those areas sabkas. I guess it's an Arabian word for sabkas, and it's just a wet area in the middle of sand dunes. So that's kind of cool. Here's a piece of sandstone. It's mostly red, and it's got these lines in it, these vertical lines. This is very iron-rich sandstone, and it came from Georgia. And it's found all up and down the eastern United States in the Valley and Ridge province. It was formed during Silurian time, which is 450 million to 400 million years ago, when there was a great desert here in the eastern United States. And so it was dry then, so the red iron that the sand was full of never got washed out of it by rains. And so this is called Red Mountain Sandstone. And if you go up to the Valley and Ridge Province to the Pinhoti Trail, I guess I'm pronouncing that right, you can find a lot of this. And these vertical lines in there that you can see are the burrowing holes of an ancient worm-like creature called Scolithus. And that's one way they identify this Silurian Red Mountain Sandstone. If you go west, following the if you start at this Red Mountain Sandstone and go west, by the time you get to Alabama, about Birmingham, it's not sand, it's mud, but it's hardened into rock, shale, and it's so iron rich that is where actually Red Mountain is in Birmingham area, and that is why Birmingham became a great center for iron forging and manufacturing back in the 1800s because of this iron-rich mud called the Red Mountain Formation. And they mined it for many, many years. I don't think they're mining this anymore to get their iron from it, but they used to. It was a huge, major source of iron, and that's why they named Birmingham, Alabama, Birmingham after Birmingham, England, where they were doing the same thing, where this iron smelting and foundries were going on back there. But this is Red Mountain Sandstone. This is actually it's probably not metamorphic, it's just sandstone. So sandstone is sand grains all compacted together into a rock. The sand grains are cemented together usually by either iron or it could be calcium, and that's what holds them together. The sandstone can contain, as you know, lots and lots of iron, and that iron can be very valuable. Oh, here's one more. If you go down in the coastal plain, you're not going to see many rocks, but this is a piece of sandstone from down in the Altamaha grit section of the coastal plain. I think Broxton Rocks is a place where they have some of this Altamaha grit sandstone down there. This is pretty heavy stuff. I don't know what it's full of. That's one of the few rocks that you find in the coastal plain. Okay, one more sandstone. This is not a good specimen. This is sandstone from the Cumberland Plateau, also called the Allegheny Plateau. We call it the Cumberland Plateau here in Georgia, but all up and down the eastern United States, and it does go from Alabama all the way up to at least Pennsylvania. Through Pennsylvania, it's called the Allegheny Plateau. And it's a high plateau, about 1,000 feet above the surrounding Valley and Ridge province. This is sand that was deposited as the huge Appalachian mountain chain was eroding back during the Pennsylvanian period and the Permian period. That would be about from maybe 350 million years ago to 300 million years ago, when Pangea, the great supercontinent Pangea, had come together. It's sand, and Lookout Mountain is made of this stuff. Cloudland Canyon State Park, you go there, you're going to see this everywhere you go. You go up to Big South Fork National Recreation Area in northern Tennessee. You're going to be seeing a lot of this Allegheny Plateau sandstone. So that's sandstone. Now, what's the difference between sandstone and metamorphic sandstone? Well, two things. Number one, the name. Metamorphic sandstone is called quartzite. Don't ask me why. It's called quartzite. And it looks very much like sandstone, except that with sandstone, the grains of sand are glued together with iron or calcium. But with quartzite, the sand grains are actually welded together by heat and pressure. And so it can look almost glassy, kind of like vein quartz a little bit. Okay, so that is sandstone, a sedimentary rock that contains mostly quartz. Pop out.